Welcome back to another video. I am Ramona. This is the Smell of Logic channel where we read Reddit stories and advice and all that kind of weird stuff. This one is over on Ask Reddit, and it is what is the strangest thing that has ever happened to you, part 2, because there's a lot of replies on this. Maybe even enough for 3, we'll find out. But here's the first story. Ready? I will at times during my sleep where I will sleep, talk, and sometimes walk. I've had conversations with my fiance while I think I'm dreaming, and he will be so confused because I'm usually sitting up staring at the wall or at him. I was touring the first house my mom lived in when her family moved here from Scotland. I was around 12 and had known that my granddad had committed suicide in that house. No one had ever told me any details other than that he had committed suicide. I had never so much as seen a picture of him. As we went into the room where it happened, I walked over and stood on the spot where it happened, and I said, "This is where it happened, isn't it?" I then described in detail how it happened with my full description of my granddad, what he was wearing, and the chair he was sitting on. Sometimes when I walk at night, street lights will go out above me and turn back on when I'm a few meters away. It's happened ever since I was a kid. It's frequent enough that other people have noticed it happening around me. I literally don't understand how or why this happens. With the amount of people saying it happens to them too, we need to make a sub for it and try to get a video of it. I had a dream where I got a phone call saying my brother that I haven't seen in 10 years had died. 2 days later, I got a call that he actually had died. My dad claims to have had this happen twice. Not a call, but he was actually visited by the deceased in a dream. They were always happy in the dream. Then he would learn of their non-illness related sudden death after waking up. When I was in college, a drunk dude fell from a third-floor balcony and got up and walked away like it was nothing. Seriously, one of the weirdest, freakish things I've ever seen in my entire life. Edit for those asking. It was the University of Southern California, circa 2009. I did a gouge movement with a knife. Gouge, spelled wrong. Movement with a knife, and what looked like a tear appeared and became a hole that air flooded through. The hole was black and shaped like 2 pentagons side by side. It slowly fell to the ground, and I never saw it again. There have been a handful of celebrity deaths that have been announced on the same day, or even sometimes the same moment. What I'm talking about, referencing that celebrity in some way. Coincidence, but eerie. I was singing in 1999 out loud when my dad told me Prince had just died. I screamed the first half of the movie starring Bowie with my students and found out later that day that he had died. Then we had to watch him die on screen the following class where we finished the film. I titled an artwork after a Leonard Cohen song right before finding out that he died. And the most obscure is that having a conversation with friends in a boat about Brittany Murphy. I don't even know how the topic came up. But when the boat docked, someone checked their phone and her death had just been announced. That's pretty weird. I drove home at 2 a.m. one night. I live way out in the country. I was on a back road that I've driven many times, and this car looked like it was coming over the hill quite a ways away. As I got closer, it looked like it was parked just over the hill waiting. I stopped and waited to see if it was a long way off when I first saw it, so that I should come over the hill a while ago. I waited 5 minutes. Seemed really weird for where I was. No houses around. I started to drive up to it, and the light got super bright, and then it went dark. There was this blue stuff in the air above the road as I drove to where I thought it was. I've gone insane, I thought, looking like ozone burning. The second time it happened, my buddy was with me, and the same spot, same time, same spot. This blew his mind, but we never talk about it now. I have one. When I was a kid, I'd sometimes wake up in the middle of the night. It happened, but the weird part was that I was feeling this immense fear, and all of a sudden I could hear really loud sounds. An example is hearing an orchestra play a note off key for a few seconds, and then sudden silence. It was awful. I used to think it was paranormal, but now I'm 100% sure that it isn't. I still have no idea what caused these insane moments to happen. I know for sure I was awake, and I know I wasn't in sleep paralysis because I would have been able to move. It was just really strange that it would happen to me. If anyone else has gone through this or knows what it is, please do tell. Oh, and I also used to feel like I was falling when I was laying in bed. I would jolt up in fear and be like, "What the F was that?" I know others have felt that too. Just find it weird how our bodies and mind can create really powerful illusions or trick ourselves into thinking we're falling and hearing a live concert while laying in bed. 3 days ago, I was scrolling through Reddit as usual, and I felt like I had seen these memes before, like a week or ago or something. It really wasn't only memes, and I saw the same posts, same comments. It felt like I had lived that moment before. Maybe you spend too much time on Reddit. I'm just gonna say. There are seriously so many things that have happened to me in the past decades that I don't even know which tops what. But more recently, some cuts magically appeared on my arm out of nowhere. I mean, I was just sitting at my desk and noticing that my arm was itchy. I looked down and there were these crisscross red lines all over. I've actually told the story before on Reddit and posted a picture on my arm of my arm. It was a couple of days, but the cuts appear because I was trying to be reasonable. Um, but I'm done with that now. I actually have a lot of stories like this along some interesting theories, but I have no proof of anything, so it's all just my word. I've actually been thinking about doing a regular live stream Q&A to talk about this stuff because there was a support group openly talking about it, and it's surprised by how liberating it is to just openly talk about it and answer questions about it. I had sleep paralysis nightmare when I was a kid, where I saw a red-eyed, dark figure standing in the doorway. It's always stuck with me. I've called him the boogeyman ever since. One day I was browsing Reddit and someone painted a picture of their sleep paralysis demon. It was like the guy I painted in my exact dream. And then a bunch of people commented that they'd seen the same creature. It always makes me uneasy to think about it. Wow, that one's a little strange. That sounds suspicious. I was staying in a tea house in remote Nepal and woke up hyper early one morning, awake with the desire to go outside. I walked to the front porch area and looked at Alma de Palm the moment it began to aspen glow at dawn. Surreal and beautiful. I blame it on the nicotine, but there's a chance that it was something I was supposed to see. What's mysterious is that I routinely have acknowledged existence is something random, not fate braided. I try to convince myself that these things don't matter. I'm always reminded of that timing and start to question otherwise. Time slipped by my friend and I one day. We got a contract in another town and drove out daily for 2 weeks. It was an hour to get there and an hour back, but one day it took us 3 hours to get back to town. My friend realized something was wrong when his wife called him up asking why he had turned off his phone and why he was so late. We left a little before 2 p.m., and the call came around 5 p.m. To this day, we can't explain it. And to further complicate matters, we both have receipts from a gas station we stopped at just before we got to the highway. They are both time-stamped a bit after 2 p.m. My theory is that the aliens took us for 2 hours, but who the hell knows? I've had similar things happen. Left my house to go pick up something up from the store. I remember driving and leaving my house, but nothing after. I only remember returning home a few hours later. It was only like a 25-minute drive from the store. I don't know what happened in between. My husband has this happen every once in a while. He goes to work, and it's a commute, so it's about 25 minutes, and he drives it every day. To work and from work, same route every time. And sometimes he knows how long it takes, and he knows what the speed limit is, and he does the same thing every time. And sometimes he'll arrive earlier. It's never been late. It's always been earlier than he should have. And it's weird. It's happened definitely more than once. It's happened probably about a dozen times over the 10 years that he's worked out there, and he never can explain it. And it's like, I don't do anything differently. The car's not behaving differently. There's no reason why I would get there earlier than I should. So this sort of stuff really does happen. It's kind of strange, but what can you do? Next story. Out-of-body experience. I realized several months later that I had seen the future. I was pretty much an atheist at that time, so I opened up a very big can of worms. I became a spiritual nut for a while, joined a doomsday cult, and all that. Good times. Wow. I was living in this house alone for a few months. Every night at 10, I would hear cat toys, like the bells, and footsteps in the living room. I just always locked myself in my bedroom at night because of it. I also, being a paranoid human, made sure every door was locked and bolted every time I got in the house. One night, I was getting ready for bed and went to the room. I ended up hearing loud, heavy footsteps outside and what sounded like a door slam. I turned all the lights on to go check. The dog was still living in the room. I was still in the living room, and he was laying on the couch staring at me as the front door was wide open. When I tell you, I was freaked out. No one believed me about the noises of the door till my boyfriend spent the night one night and heard the footsteps and dog paws in the living room. Thinking it was my dog, he brushed it off until he realized that he was asleep in bed beside both of us. Still freaks me out to this day. Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I have a vivid memory of being at the Statue of Liberty as a child on my dad's shoulders, seeing the skyline of NYC. I remember that we ate that for lunch that day, etc. I remember the ferry we took. I've always thought about this memory and talked about it, but my family denies we ever went to NYC. I didn't go for the first time till I was 23, but strangely enough, when I went, I remembered everything just as it had been when I was there with my dad. Okay, I know I had eaten some mushrooms, but I literally ate them less than 15 minutes before, so ridiculously impossible that they kicked in. I saw the craziest, brightest purple light come from out of the sky, sort of like a shooting star, but it lasted way longer and was super intense. Completely purple, too. Just no explanation for that. I was about 18 to 20, and in the back seat of the car going down the highway. It wasn't windy out in the slightest, unless you count the wind from the car going 60 miles an hour on the highway, but that's irrelevant. We're going between two large hills, not mountains, but they're about 50 feet tall. 50 feet plus tall. And atop one of the hills was what looked like an all-black hot air balloon kind of thing, not made of cloth or fabric. It's clearly metal and had no basket, and there was no sunlight, shine, or reflection, just a black matte color. No wind, but this thing is moving like you see UFOs zip around in movies. It's literally going like 100 miles per hour, all over the place in different directions, and turning upside down and super sideways super fast. There are several cars pulled over at the side of the highway with people outside gawking at it. We didn't pull over, but Mom and Dad also commented they had no effing clue what it was, and they'd never seen anything like it before. My dad tried rationalizing it that it was a fallen weather balloon, but it looked nothing like a weather balloon on Google Images. Someone else said it was probably a broken hot air balloon, but this was very clearly not made of anything flexible like cloth. It was very stiff and not 100% the exact same shape. That's weird. I was in a bad place a while ago, some years ago. I blacked out while driving and woke up in a different sides of town and even one other town which was about 20 minutes north of where I was at. Lots of windy roads, and I still don't know how I'm not dead or anything like this. I think it's supposed to be windy, but I remember waking up briefly with my head against my window while driving and trying to focus on the road pulled over, only to have my world go dark a few seconds later. Yeah, that one's a little odd. Both of my lungs collapsed at the same time, almost over 50% collapsed, and I was walking around like it was perfectly normal, until I decided to go to the ER for bubble sounds in my chest. None of the doctors could figure out how this had happened to me. They didn't know how I had just up and walked around and laughed. Strong will, man. Edit 2 to answer some questions. I am a 5'7" thin woman. I have heard it was very common in tall and thin men. 2. Yes, it was bilateral pneumothorax. Doctor just couldn't figure out what happened. 3. I ended up having 4 more spontaneous pneumothoraxes within the span of 2 years. 4. I was aged 19 to 21 when this happened. 26 years old now. 5. They did a fluoridosis procedure to get it to stop happening. It hasn't happened since. Back in the 90s, spaced a few years apart while I was in college, I had 2 very realistic dreams. The first was about 94, and I dreamed about how a big ice storm in Texas, and it caused a huge pileup of cars. In the dream, we were able to narrowly avoid each crashed car as we drove down the interstate. When I woke up, I thought Texas doesn't even get ice storms. I was only 19 at the time. Then a couple of weeks later, I saw on the news about how an ice storm in Texas had caused pileups on the interstate. I told a friend of mine I dreamt about it a couple of weeks back, but he didn't believe me. The second time occurred when I was an exchange student in Mexico. I dreamt there was a volcano that erupted somewhere, and there was flooding and mayhem and people being swept away. I told my buddy about the dream while we sat in the kitchen table of our homestay. We turned on the TV, and there was a news story of everything I had just told him. It's been 25 years, and haven't had another dream like those since. One time, late at night, I was doing my homework in my room. I was listening to a Matt Zoe album. Towards the end, the song Lights Out is starting to fade and to turn the lights out. When I said it a minute left in the song, not only did my room lights go out, but my laptop turned off and restarted. Outage couldn't explain the laptop. Outage couldn't explain why I flipped my light switch off and on again to get power back. Laptop was in great condition, and I was just typing on Microsoft Word. Never leaped up to turn off the lights, off and on again, quicker. I had one of those life-size giant rag dolls with yarn hair. One night I woke up and she was waving her arms around, all placed on my beanbag. I know it's not malicious. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds like I was dreaming, but I wasn't. She was moving around all by herself. To this day, I don't fuck with dolls. Edit. So when I saw her moving, I got super scared and hid under my blanket for like 10 minutes with my heart racing. Frozen in fear, building up the courage to run out of my room. Eventually, I ran out of my room to get my parents, whose bedroom was downstairs, and my dad came and got the doll and put her in the living room. I was too scared to sleep in my room, so I went back to sleep in my brother's bed, which I would have to do when I had bad dreams and such. We heard farting and magazine pages flipping, and at first I thought it was my dad. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning at this point, who just couldn't go back to sleep. But when we were yelling out, my dad didn't answer, so we were like, oh my God, it's Samantha, the doll. Since I was with my big brother, I was brave, and I started shouting at her from the bedroom, saying we weren't scared and we were going to kill her and all this. I was so traumatized by this living doll, though, that my parents brought her to my nanny's house. It was a Christmas gift from a family friend that I didn't want to get rid of because I felt bad, and didn't want the doll to come back and be mad at me. But I would go for sleepovers at my nana's multiple times every year, and when I would go, she would take the doll out of the playroom and put it in the back room and lock the door. It was always so hard to fall asleep, but the doll would always sleep with me, which would help. Fast forward when I was 15 and having a lot of mental health issues unrelated to the doll. And a new med ended up making me have some paranoia and see a few things, including a little girl a few times. My aunt was upset over my struggles, and hearing the little girl visuals, she went to my nana's, took the doll, and burned it in the backyard to end my fear of it once and for all. So that's the full story and what happened to the doll. I would not have burned it. I don't know what I would have done, but burning things usually releases things, is what I've always heard and believed. I once saw a car without a driver on the interstate, and there was even someone in the passenger seat talking to literally no one in the driver's seat. No one you could see. It's hard to pick the strangest, but there was this time a can of soda exploded and then didn't. I was working in my garden and had gotten myself a can of Coke Zero. I cracked it open on the way out of the back door and took a few hearty chugs and set it on my small garden table to keep out my raised beds, or keep out by my raised beds, and got back to working in the garden. I have on wireless earbuds and listening to a podcast as I work on cleaning the pumpkin patch of weeds, when out of the clear blue I hear practically and feel a loud bang, to the point I exclaimed loudly, "What the F?" and pulled my earbuds out. I live in a rough neighborhood, and there's been shootings, and what is not so kind of duck down and start looking just to get a feel of things. That's when I see it. My can of Coke is knocked down to the ground and just spitting foamy Coke everywhere. No way, that's the noise, right? But I run over and pick it up with the logic of Diet Coke probably not being good for the plants. I wipe it clean and start looking it over and realize that it's not only is it full, it's completely unopened. I know I opened it. I know I drank half of it. I know the moments before I had seen it laying on the ground, shooting Coke up in the air. I even had to wipe it off. I have no idea what the bang was, or how my mind spilled Coke suddenly became full and unopened in my hands. That one's weird. I have a really strong sense of intuition, which freaks me out sometimes. It starts with movies and books, and me correctly guessing the ending plot twists. But movies and books are often predictable, so I don't think too much about that. Then I started accurately guessing the topics my partner and his family discuss in their home language. I cannot speak the language. Sometimes his mom will ask for a random question in our language. Then I will ask the exact same question, but in English. I also get precognition about spiders. I'll get intrusive images of spiders when I'm trying to sleep, and I always see a spider of the same image over the next few days. That's a little, yeah. a little strange. But hey, maybe it'll help you in the future. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed listening. Please leave a like or maybe subscribe to my channel. There's lots of videos on here. Find something you like. Always leave a comment. I like to read the comments and I will try to respond to them. But anyway, thanks again and we'll talk to you later. Bye.